Hey guys, welcome back to Jessin Reads Romance. I'm Jessin, and today I'm here with my mid-month April wrap-up. I have quite a few books to talk about. Thankfully, I had some time. For the past couple of days, I've been on a break, and I was able to double the amount of books that I read for the month of April, for the first half of April so far, and so yeah, I have lots to talk about. I do have one book to rant about. Right off the bat, we're going to talk about The Confidence of Wildflowers by Michaela Smeltzer. I have lots to say, and I am going to rant about it. I will be upfront about the triggers because even though the author does include a trigger warning page, which I had not read before I went into the book, if you're familiar with ebooks, the book actually opens to chapter 1. I don't normally have any triggers, so I don't care enough to go backwards and go look at the trigger warnings. And not enough of my friends had read it before. And usually my friends are pretty good about including things that could be triggering. It's like, if my friends are including a trigger warning, then I'm like, maybe I do want to just go peek at that and see. Well, yeah, that didn't happen. I went in this book not knowing much about it. The only thing I knew about it was that it's an age gap romance. And I was like, I love age gaps. And apparently this book is kind of making waves. And I want to jump on this book before I hear too much about it. Because the more I hear about a book, the less excited I tend to be. If I feel like the book is getting overhyped, I'm like, do I want to pick it up because maybe I won't feel the same. Anyway, those were all the factors that made me pick up a book without looking a little deeper into it. But I will say I did, after reading the first book in this duet, yes, it's a duet, that is another red flag that I was unaware of whenever I first picked up the book. The trigger warnings included in the book, I don't feel like cover enough. A very certain aspect of a particular trigger, it was left out. And it would have totally influenced me to not pick up this book. So I am going to name that trigger, and it might be spoilery because it does happen at the end of this book. And yeah, okay, let's just get into the rant. If you've not read this book and you don't want to be spoiled, I'm going to talk spoilers. So, The Confidence of Wildflowers. I was very excited going in knowing it was an age gap. Salem is our heroine. She's 18, just graduated high school, and she starts falling for her neighbor who's 31. His name's Thayer. He's also a single dad to a 6-year-old little boy named Forrest. Before I get into my absolute rant about this book, because I feel like a lot of people will kind of come at me being like, oh, you're being too harsh on the book just because this scenario happened, because apparently a lot of people really loved this. It was so emotional to them that it was apparently their favorite book that they had read in a very long time. And I beg to differ about that for a number of reasons, but I will say that I was already not totally loving the book. I had some issues with the writing style. I had some issues with, where's this book going? Why is this author including these certain scenes that seem to go nowhere, absolutely nowhere. I will include some text that I actually was sending to Crystal as I was reading it because she finished it before me. She did tell me that there was something at the end that had triggered her so badly that she was so mad and in a rage. And I did not ask for any further details because I was like, oh, I want to see if I have the same reactions. Because believe it or not, my friends and we don't have the same opinions about books all the time. And this was one of those instances where I was like, had my little experimental cap on. And I was like, I want to see if I have the same reaction as Crystal as I'm reading it. So I didn't ask her for any other details, and she didn't give it to me because anybody knows I don't like to be spoiled unless I ask for it. But I was telling Crystal, I was just like, I don't particularly love this writing. I feel like it's a little amateur because there's lots of things that are happening that I feel like are completely pointless in what's going on. And as soon as I finished the book, I finally understood what was going on. To me, the author had a very basic idea for a book. Unfortunately, it revolved around the conflict that happens at the end. So the big trigger that was left out for this book is that there is the death of a child. And the big problem that I have with this particular death of a child is that this child was a prominent character in the book. And he's pretty integral for the relationship between Salem and Thayer as a couple, and you fall in love with him as a character, and then the author kills the little boy in a accidental drowning toward the end of the book, and that's the reason why Thayer and Salem break up at the end. I don't like that. And I feel like this is kind of like a deeper issue that I take offense to people who think that the only romances, and I say romances because I'm like, you're actually looking for a love story. You're not looking for a romance. You're looking for a love story. You're looking for Nicholas Sparks. You're looking for something like Colleen Hoover, It Ends With Us, except Colleen Hoover actually writes very well, but that's not the type of romances I want to read. Those are love stories that focus more on tragedy. But the only romances they feel like are worthwhile are books that so tragic and so heartbreaking. And I feel like this is just a bigger conversation about society putting down romance because it focuses on people finding joy and being happy in the end and finding fulfilling relationships. And sadly, society just does not reward those types of books. They reward the type of books that focus a lot on tragedy and trauma and suffering. And I feel like this is what that book is. This book focuses so much on tragedy, trauma, and suffering, and less on the actual relationship. The relationship is very fragile between Thayer and Salem, and very immature, actually. I had hope in the beginning, but there was certain things that Salem was doing that I was just like, this is so immature, and I don't like when my younger characters, if I have an age gap, I don't like when the younger character feels like they're not mature enough to be with the older person. And I will say it's not all on Salem. Thayer also did some things where I'm just kind of like, guys, I mean, the communication here needs to pep it up, okay? So yes, I was very upset by the death of Forrest. It is an on-page death scene. And as soon as Salem and Thayer were in the pool because he had gotten mad at his dad and kind of run off in the backyard, and then Thayer couldn't find him, and then they both figure out, oh my gosh, we need to go check the pool. And as soon as he came up with his shoe and we knew that he was in the pool, I could not read the rest of the scene. I was like, this is not the type of shit that I want to read. I don't want to read about the death of this little boy. And it was, it went on for a long time, and I was just like, that's the type of book that this author wants to write. So I feel like personally that Michaela Smeltzer had an idea that I'm going to write an age gap romance, and I need the little boy's death to tear my characters apart, and then we'll come back for part 2 and continue with their relationship. And I did go read spoilers for the second book because I was like, I'm not picking it up. This reinforces my idea that duets are a complete scam. It's just there to get you to buy the second book so that you spend more money on this author and to complete one story. It didn't need a duet. It did not need a duet. I read the synopsis for the second book and I was just like, that was a hot mess. It's even more messy than the first book was. So yes, I had a problem with the death of a child and that not being a more specific trigger at the beginning of the book. And also just reviewers, a lot of reviewers on Goodreads will say like, oh my goodness, something happens at the end, but like, I just don't want to spoil it for you. There are such things as these spoiler tags that you can actually hide your spoiler within your review so that if people want to go view the spoiler, they can click on it and see it. And then if you don't want it, you don't have to see it. It just says spoiler and you can't see anything. And I'm just like, just say it. Just say it for those who want to know, okay? So I'm saying it. But like I said, the relationship just wasn't that great. The writing wasn't that great. But let me tell you why I was not feeling Salem and Thayer as a whole. I wasn't going to give this book 5 stars anyway before the death of the child. As I said, Salem is already in a relationship. She has a long-term boyfriend, Caleb, and they've been dating in high school. He's moving away to Boston to go to Harvard. She wants to just stay in her small town. She doesn't have any plans to go to college ever, and she wants to work at her mom's antique shop. So this is the summer before her boyfriend moves, but his mom is kind of keeping them apart, making excuses like, oh, you need to stay at the house and do this, and like, oh, I signed you up to do this instead, knowing that he had planned to hang out with Salem. So Salem's already feeling like, his mom doesn't even like me. He's going to be moving away. I don't know how this long-term relationship is going to work anyway. So she's already having doubts that they should be together at all. Then she starts having feelings for Thayer, her next door neighbor, who's very hot. She's spending a lot of time with him. I don't blame her for being attracted to Thayer. That's not where I'm going with this. It's when she starts having feelings for Thayer and Caleb starts cluing in. There was a very forced scene where one night she was so tired after hanging out with Caleb that he had to carry her in the house. Like, she was just so tired that she was sleeping in the car, but he wanted to carry her inside the house instead of her just like walking. And Thayer sees Caleb walking with her in his arms and immediately assumes that she's hurt and he has hurt her. And so like starts going off on Caleb, and Caleb's just like, what the fuck? And Salem's like, this is my boyfriend. It's okay. I'm just so sleepy. I just can't walk right now. And that was the first introduction that Caleb and Thayer have to each other. Caleb immediately dislikes Thayer. Like, what the fuck is wrong with your neighbor? What is up with that? That was such a weird thing. And I agree, Caleb, that was weird. Then there's like a little town fair thing going on. She's doing face painting. Her boyfriend is going to get like drinks and stuff. And then Thayer comes bringing cupcakes because it's like their little bonding thing is she bakes cupcakes for Thayer and Thayer loves them. And that's her excuse to go over to his house a lot of the times. And he brings her a cupcake. When Caleb comes back, he's like, oh, who brought you the cupcake? And she lies and she's like, my mom did. And like he almost knows. He knows that she's lying. And she even brings it up. She's like, you don't have to worry about him. And I'm like, if you have to bring up and reassure your boyfriend that he doesn't have to worry about this other man who should not even be a thing, like you're doing something wrong already. Get what I'm saying? Like he's picking up on the vibes between you and your neighbor and you're leading him along. You could break up with him. She actually has an opportunity to break up with him and she decides not to. She's contemplating breaking up with Caleb. And then in the same breath, she tells him that she loves him. And I'm just like, what? Crazy. She also kisses Thayer later on, and after she goes home and her boyfriend's there, she immediately sleeps with her boyfriend because she feels a lot of guilt for kissing Thayer and finding pleasure in that. And I'm just like, be a grown-up and break up with your boyfriend. He's moving away anyway. It's not going to last. Nope, she won't do it. She actually cheats on Caleb with Thayer. And at this point, I do actually like Salem and Thayer together. They're building kind of like this cute little family unit. And I'm just like, girl, please break up with your damn boyfriend because Caleb has done nothing wrong at this point. I'm just like, I don't understand why you're stringing him along. And then finally she breaks up with Caleb. And I'm like, oh God, that was a long time coming. Then they hide their relationship for the rest of the book. Thayer and Salem hide their relationship. And it's so weird to me because the only reason why they're hiding, I guess, is because she is younger than him. But there's a scene where they're throwing Forrest his birthday party, okay? Her mom's in on it. Her mom's with them. They're at Thayer's house decorating it, waiting for Forrest to be dropped off by his mom. And her mom observes like, oh, you and Thayer seem to be close. Like, is there something there? And she just straight up lies to her mom. Straight up lies. They have been in a fucking relationship for a couple months now or whatever. How long it was, I have no idea how much time has passed. He has built a home gym in his basement just for her because he doesn't like her running alone in the morning. So he spends thousands of dollars to convert his entire basement into a home gym just so that she can go down there. And I'm like, that's big relationship moves, but we're not acknowledging that you're in a relationship. He goes pick her up from work sometimes and they go like out on dates and they still can't admit that they're in a relationship, and it's very weird because there's no reason why they have to hide it. She's 18, she's a grown woman, she can date whoever the fuck she wants, but they just cannot say it. And this is the greater problem with the book because Michaela Smeltzer is wasting time until she can get to her conflict, her death of a child conflict, which is so horrible that you're using a child's death to separate your characters. Like, that's the only reason why this child had to die, is because you needed a way to separate your characters, and the more dramatic and the more traumatic, the better. Right? No, I hate that. So yeah, I had lots of problems with their relationship. And after Forrest dies, her response, Salem's response, like cemented that this was one of the worst books that I had read in a very long time. Instead of just trying to be there for Thayer, she decides to make the 2-hour drive to go see her ex-boyfriend and cries on his shoulder. So Thayer lost his son, okay? He needs people there. Even if he pushes her away at this point, like, I still don't understand why her first thought is, oh, I need Caleb. I need to go cry on Caleb's shoulder. Caleb didn't fucking know, Forrest. Why are you going cry on Caleb's shoulder? I don't understand. Like, cry on your mom's shoulder. Cry on your sister's shoulder. Like, what is going on here? So that really aggravated me because I knew where this was going. Caleb goes with her. Her ex-boyfriend goes with her to her current boyfriend's funeral for his son. What? What? This girl, I'm telling you. Okay? The mom is even looking at her like, what's going on? Like, you and Caleb, like, okay, you're not together, but you just brought him to the funeral of Forrest. And I feel like there was something going on with you and Thayer. Like, the mom knows something's going on. She's not dumb. And then, of course, we have the kicker at the end where she finds out that she's pregnant. She has the age-old throw-up reaction to fighting. Like, oh, I'm so queasy because I'm so upset. These two people are fighting that I love. And that means I'm pregnant. So she takes a pregnancy test. And I don't think they actually explicitly say that she's pregnant, but she's pregnant. She's fucking And let me tell you about the second book, okay? If you don't want to know about the second book, don't listen to this. But in the second book, apparently Salem ends up by marrying Caleb a year later after Forrest's death. This girl could not give Thayer the time to grieve and did not tell him that she was pregnant, and instead keeps the fact that she had his daughter for, I think, 6 years. 6 years she is married to Caleb, knowing that she doesn't love him, but she's like, oh, hopefully I can love him, and keeps a secret, keeps the baby a secret. And apparently when Thayer finds out, he's almost really cool with it. Like, he's okay with it. He's like, oh yeah, you kept my child for me for 6 years. Like, I'm totally okay with that. And now we can be a happy family. And she divorces Caleb, and she goes to be with Thayer, and almost like rips her daughter away from Caleb, who has been the father this whole time. Apparently the daughter did know that she had 2 dads. Like, she was aware that Caleb is my dad, but I also have another dad that I've never met before. From what I've heard from reviewers who read the second book and were really mad, like people who liked the first one and were upset about the second one, were just kind of like, I didn't even care for Caleb that much, but the way she treated him was so dirty. Just like, forget you were my replacement, but now that I can have Thayer now, thanks, I'll take my daughter that you helped raise and go play happy family with the person that I really wanted. And I'm just like, I hate it so much. So I gave this book 1 star. Originally it was 2 stars, and then I read what happened in the second book, and I was just like, this author's just fucking around. She's just throwing in past trauma, sexual, physical abuse, cancer, death, dying into a book and being like, people will love it because it's emotional. And I hate that. I hate that. It's so lazy, so bad, such bad writing. Okay, so I've talked about this book enough. It's the worst book that I've read. I don't think I've given a book 1 star since I've started my YouTube channel, since I've started the podcast. I haven't given a book 1 star, I don't believe. But yeah, absolutely hate it. Okay, let's talk about some other books that I actually liked. All right, let's start with the first book that I read for the month of April, which was Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. I've not read this series before, and Jen from the Book Refuge is hosting this huge read-along for all of Sarah J. Maas's books, leading up to the next book in the Crescent City series. Say that 3 times fast. I am aware that these worlds are connecting. There was a very big thing that happened at the end of House of Sky and Breath that is like, yeah, her worlds are connecting. I have heard that there are some connections to like the actual Throne of Glass series, and since I haven't read it, I was totally on board for having this read along. So I read Throne of Glass for the first time. I was introduced to the characters, our heroine, which I know that a lot of people really like this heroine, Selena, and she's an assassin, and she's had this reputation since she was young, but nobody knew that this particular assassin, was a young girl. Well, she gets caught and gets thrown into this prison, which nobody really survives, but she has survived. And one day she's tapped because the king wants to host a competition for somebody to basically be his like royal assassin, mercenary person. Okay, now I will say, reading this book, it was very obvious that this was like the first book that she wrote. And it reads very YA. And I don't read YA anymore. I don't particularly care for it. There's certain things in YA that are very telling that I just don't care for anymore. Like the focus on the outfits. She describes her dresses in very intricate detail, and there's like an obsession with like the beauty of things, and I associate that with YA a lot. Not to say that adult romance does not describe beautiful dresses, but there's just a certain way that I feel like YA does that, and it's just like very prominent here. I was a little bit bored with this one, but I was expecting it. I've been told that things don't get moving until the very end of book 2 and book 3. Like, then the plot actually starts picking up. So I didn't really get much from the first book, I will say. I didn't really get much. I did really like the end. The third act. Sarah J. Maas, in my opinion, is very good at creating a very interesting third act in her books. And that was what I was most invested in. I also was just kind of like, I don't like love triangles, so I was trying not to get invested in any male character. Because I was like, I don't know which one she's going to pick. So I'm just trying to see the good in both of them and try not to pick favorites. So yeah, that's how I approach Throne of Glass. I'm giving this book 3.5 stars. It wasn't bad, but it was pretty forgettable. But I'm okay because I know that it's gonna get better. Next, I read How to Be a Wallflower by Eloisa James, and this is her first book in her Would Be Wallflower series. It has a slight connection to My American Duchess, and we have an American hero. Our heroine wants to be a wallflower. Like, she's like, oh, spinster, I love it. I want to start wearing turbans. That kind of signals that you are, you know, in your dotage. But she also has this friend who makes costumes because her mom wasn't in theater. Her mom liked dating people who were in theater, okay? And her father had indulged her, let her have her affairs and stuff, but Cleo is a little bit scarred from how her mother just threw herself at actors and was a little bit promiscuous. And that's a big reason why Cleo's like, I'm just never going to have a relationship. I'm just going to be a wallflower. It's fine. Like, I don't want to be like my mom. But she has a friend who is a seamstress. She makes all the costumes for the local theater, and she's in debt. She had this contract to partner up with this American guy to save her business, but what she didn't realize is that her business would have to move to America. So Cleo's like, oh, well, I'll invest in your business because you weren't aware that you would have to move to America, so I'm going to be your investor instead. Well, this American, Jacob Astor Addison, decides to pay a visit and being like, no, I want this. And he and Cleo start butting heads because he's like, no, I'm investing in this. I can take her business to new heights, and the market in America is just going to be greater. And Cleo's like, you just don't understand. This business is English and it's going to stay English. So I kind of really love their relationship. He's trying to kind of prove that this seamstress can only make kind of gaudy theater costumes, and Cleo's out to prove that she can make beautiful gowns for the nouveau riche. And they come to an agreement that he is going to select a wardrobe for her, for Cleo, dress her, and she will select a wardrobe for him, and the seamstress is going to make them. So I like it. It's kind of a little bit of competition and also heavy flirting. I think that Eloisa James is pretty good at ramping up that sexual tension between them, and I really love them as a couple. I gave the book 4.5 stars. Next, I reread Filthy Rich. This is a second book in her 5-Point Mob series, Serena Ackroyd's 5-Point Mob series, and it's an age gap arranged marriage romance. I've already talked about this book a lot, so I'll just like briefly say that my feelings truly didn't change while rereading this book. I still very much enjoyed it as a mafia romance. I love Vanessa, I loved Owen, and I really loved their relationship. I also was noticing that there is very few other points of views, and this is kind of why I wanted to reread Serena Ackroyd. Is would my ratings change for these books? Because there's something that she starts doing. She starts inserting more and more and more points of views that are not our hero and heroine, and there's very few in here, and I thought it was fine. So I still give this book 4.5 stars. But in Filthy Dark, she starts adding lots of point of views. And this is where I kind of like my enjoyment lessens for the book as a whole, but not for the couple. Every single chapter that's in the point of view of our hero or our heroine, Declan or Ayla, I loved. I did not care for any other point of view. I did not really care about the goings on with like the sparrows and all of the shady underworld stuff that was going on. I was very uninterested. I'm so invested in the relationships, not so much in the mafia world. So I did drop down my rating for Filthy Dark. I gave this 3.5 stars because the book as a whole is not interesting. I was skimming a lot and just interested in Declan and Ayla, which was a second chance romance, Secret Baby. Then I picked up Filthy Sex, which I love this book as well, but only when it pertains to the characters. Camille and Brennan have such an interesting relationship because Camille is actually the daughter of Brennan's kind of former mistress. He was dating an older woman, married woman. When Camille gets in trouble, Brennan offers to marry her to protect her. And it's kind of fulfilling this wish that her mother had for Brennan to protect her daughters when she wasn't going to be there anymore because she knew her life was in danger and she was going to die soon, and she did. And Camille has had a rough life, a rough go of it, and she has low self-esteem and she does self-harm. And the way that Brennan handles this and brings her out of that, it is so beautiful, and I love that. The rest of the point of views are so lacking, and I skimmed them all, and it did not make a difference in the book whether or not I read those points of views. The story is fine with just Brennan and Camille, but I can't give this book 5 stars anymore. I just can't. I skimmed half the book because there's so many other points of views. So I gave this book 4 stars. Then I read Against a Wall by Kate C. Wells. Now I had started binging Kate C. Wells' backlist after reading The Tyrant Alpha's Rejected Mate. Such a mouthful for that one. It's her first book in a paranormal series with wolf shifters, and I really loved that one. So I wanted to see what else she had on offer. And I read the first book in the series back in March, have not reviewed it yet on my channel, but I really like that one. It's a small town romance. This is the Stone Cut County series. I very much enjoyed hitting a wall. And Against a Wall is about Cash, who is the younger brother to the hero from the first book. And he is kind of like the town darling. He can kind of do no wrong. He's very extroverted. He speaks with everybody. Everybody loves Cash. And he's a little bit like of a redneck. This is a small town. I love the fact that he has these metal balls hanging at the end of his truck, like on the tailgate. And I'm just like, seen those before. And his love interest, Glenna, what a name. Glenna is somebody that he kind of tormented in elementary and high school. Well, the thing is, Cash has had a secret crush on her for a very long time. And Glenna used to be really good friends with his twin sister, Dinah. Dinah is on the autism spectrum, and just one day Glenna stopped coming around. So he took it upon himself to kind of be mean to Glenna because, first of all, he felt like he lost a friend because he hung around them, but also just kind of like, how dare you snub my sister? But that's not what happened. Glenna actually overheard him saying something negative about her teenage body. So she decided that she was no longer going to go over there. There was a lot more going on. She did lose her mother kind of recently, so she was feeling a lot more fragile. And obviously when we hear something negative about ourselves, somebody teasing us, especially when we're that young, I mean, you're gonna have a negative reaction. So she just kind of cut them off the walls, cut them off completely. Well, the problem is recently her dad, who owns the local newspaper, has made waves because he called out the local sheriff, who Glenna describes as the local Santa Claus, because everyone loves him. Everyone loves his wife. His wife is going through a battle with cancer. And when her father calls him out saying that he's been misappropriating federal funds to buy like tanks and stuff, like why would you need tanks in a small town? Everyone's just calling him a liar. And all of a sudden the FBI is investigating the sheriff now. So Glenna and her father are like persona non grata in this town, to the point where she's like getting graffiti on their local cafe and stuff like that. Well, when Glenna breaks up with her boyfriend, Cash decides like, oh, she's free now. I want to start dating her. The thing that I love about Kate C. Wells' books is that they're almost always sort of like a grovel romance. The hero has done something wrong to the heroine and he needs to prove himself to her. So the majority of the book is him trying to prove that he'd be good boyfriend material. And I really love that for Glenna because she deserved all of that. I gave the book 5 stars. I thought it was fun. Then I decided to delve into her MC series because it kind of has a connection with The Walls, which you find out during this book. Charge is the first book in her Steel Bones motorcycle romance, and it's my favorite of the series. I only have one more left to read. I haven't read Heavy, which is the final book in the series, and also that's Dinah's book. So Dinah is Cash's twin sister. And that's the reason why I started this series. I don't tend to gravitate towards motorcycle romances, but I was like, I'll give it a try. I've liked Kate C. Wells, obviously. And Charge is really great. This is a single mom romance. Kayla had her son, Jimmy, very young. She was 15. And she's trying to make it on her own. She's 21 right now. She and Jimmy have moved out of her parents' house, and there's some sort of tension going on between her and her parents. It's like she's afraid to let them know that she needs help, because when she starts renting this apartment and finds out that the refrigerator is already broken, she doesn't have money to replace it. The landlord isn't answering, and her neighbor, whose nickname is Boots, says, yeah, there's not really a landlord. There's just a guy that rents it out and he doesn't pay attention to this at all. So like, you're kind of on your own with that. Well, Boots has a son named Charge. His real name's not Charge. It's his motorcycle name. And I will say that the names in this motorcycle series are kind of really stupid. I won't lie. Charge kind of flirted with Kayla right whenever she moved in, but as soon as he saw that she was a single mom and saw Jimmy, which Jimmy, God, I love his character. And I love when kids are written well in a romance novel. If you're going to write a single parent romance, like, don't ignore the kids. Jimmy's written so well. He is a kind of like a grumpy old man disguised in a 6-year-old body. He is so protective of his mom, Kayla, and he's very like serious. I just absolutely adored him. He was the cutest. I love him. And I love the way that Charge actually bonds with Jimmy. And also Charge's dad, Boots, takes Jimmy under his wings too. Like, he takes him fishing fishing down by the like little lake that they have near all their houses and stuff. And what's so beautiful about this is Kayla's so intent on being independent, but she does need help. And Charge and Boots have to find a way to help her without making her feel like they're just giving her handouts, and that's how their relationship starts. Like he's like courting her, but with stuff she actually needs, and it's just, oh, I just love it. It's just really good. Okay, her parents are terrible. I hate them. I gave this book 4.5 stars. Now, the rest of the books in the series are not as great, in my opinion, and I feel like it has more to do with the fact that Charge felt very removed from like motorcycle life. We rarely were at the clubhouse, and Charge really didn't have anything going on to do with like his motorcycle club in the book. It was very focused on the relationship. The rest of the books have a little bit more to do with stuff going on in the motorcycle club. So Nickel's story, he's like an enforcer, and he's been known to have this very bad temper, and he's afraid of it because his family were notorious for being like abusers. Like his father abused his mother, his brothers are all in jail, they're abusive towards women, and so he's very afraid that he's going to be abusive as well, because like he has this rage in him that he feels like he can't control, even though he really is attracted to this girl named Story. And the prologue starts with Story being 15-year-old. Her mom is a stripper at the local strip joint, and there are these stupid jocks who are basically being very disgusting towards her, and she's being innocent. She wants to try out for the cheerleader team, and they're just being disgusting, and Nickel just like beats them to a bloody pulp and just like, Story, don't be so stupid. Don't go off with these guys alone again. And then she gets a case of hero worship towards Nickel, but Nickel's just like, nope, can't go there. There's a bit of an age gap. I think he's about like 21 and she's 15. So we have a bit of a time jump to Story being 19, and now she works at the strip joint. And Nickel kind of tortures himself watching her, but not being able to touch her. Like she wants to be with him so bad, and he is so resistant. And that's basically their story. Him not wanting to be with Story, and she's pursuing him. And it was okay. It was fine. It wasn't great. I gave that one 3.5 stars. Now, Scrap book was a little bit more typical motorcycle romance, because there's this rivalry between the Steel Bones Motorcycle Club and the Something Raiders. And Krista, our heroine, 10 years ago, got caught in the crossfire, and she was brutally attacked. And in the beginning of the book, you don't know exactly what happens. You just know that she was attacked. And this guy named Scrap, who always had a crush on her, ended up by going to jail because he killed the guy who did that to her. And now he's out of jail. She has changed so drastically. She's had so many surgeries and gained weight, chopped off all her hair. Like, she doesn't want to call any attention to herself at all. And she has so much trauma that hasn't been, dealt with fully. She definitely suffers from PTSD attacks. Like, she gets flashbacks very often. And when Scrap comes home, he's so pissed because nobody told him that Krista was not okay. They were like, oh yeah, she's doing so good. She moved out. She really just moved into the above garage apartment next to her parents' house. She's got a job. Well, that's tending bar at the clubhouse. Like, she hasn't really healed any from the trauma, and that's what he's trying to do. And even though, like, I really loved the fact that Scrap was so intent, like, just like, I don't care, like, you're gonna try to push me away, I'm here for you, I'm here for you. It still was like, Kate C. Wells definitely is writing these heroines who are hard to love. And that's not a bad thing. It's just hard to love him. So I was frustrated a little bit with Krista, but not because of her trauma or anything, just like some things that she was saying. I was just kind of like, meh. Don't really love that for Scrap, but oh well. So I gave that one 3.5 stars as well. Plum is about, she's really not a stripper, she's an escort. And again, this girl, it's really hard to love her. This is a wrong side of the track romance, because this guy named Adam, he grew up in kind of the same neighborhood that she's living in right now, but the difference is his mom actually got pregnant by a rich dude, and he ended up by marrying her, taking Adam under his wing like a son, and gave him the keys to his company. So now Adam is a millionaire. And one night, his stepbrother, who is a little bit of a mess, actually gets a blowjob from the heroine Plum, and he's not paying her what he owes her. So they kind of get in a fight with a bunch of the motorcycle club guys, and he becomes obsessed. Adam becomes obsessed with Plum and visits back again and wants to kind of date her. And she's like used to making it on her own, doesn't trust anybody. So again, this is a romance where Adam has to convince her that he's trustworthy, that he wants to be with her, but she makes it really hard. She makes it very, very hard. So I was frustrated with her character a lot. I gave this one 3 stars. Then we have Wall, which is the one that I wanted to read because Wall is about John Wall, who is the older brother of Kellum from Hitting a Wall and Cash from Against a Wall. And I was like, oh my goodness, I hadn't realized that he was part of the motorcycle club. This is a second chance romance between John and Mona, and we do see them in Against the Wall and they're together and they're happy and all that. But apparently John cheated on Mona, and this is a second chance romance between them. And woof, it was kind of hard for me to get over why he cheated on her. Like, there's a book that I really dislike by QB Tyler called Forget Me Not, and it's kind of a similar situation. But I like these characters better. But yeah, I didn't think it was a good reason. I gave this book 3 stars. I just felt like we had the same conversation over and over and over and over and over again for this book. And then the final book in the MC series by Casey Wells that I've read is 40. This is a second chance romance between 40 and Navia. It's Heaven spelled backwards, okay? I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but Heaven spelled backwards, that's her name. When they were younger, they were high school sweethearts, both living in the shitty part of town. 40 decides to join the army. He's like, it's only gonna be for 2 years and it's for us. I'm doing this for us. She gets really annoyed because he doesn't know that she's living in a household where she's being abused and she doesn't tell him. So her response is just being like, oh, you left me, you abandoned me. So they're still together while he's in the army, but then she starts going around the MC club and like flirting with other guys, getting naked in front of like his best friend, and everyone's reporting to him being like, she's throwing herself at other guys while you're over there, like what the fuck? And so he breaks up with her. He's like, what are you doing? And this is the second chance romance. I don't know how many years it's been, but she's in trouble, and of course she runs to 40. And this heroine is the one that I dislike the most. I felt like she was so difficult to understand. I didn't understand why she couldn't open up to 40 after all these years, and she just is like, she does stuff to push him away and then gets mad that he does end up by being like, well, fuck this. I don't want to deal with your bullshit. And she gets mad and she's like, oh, I knew it. I knew that he was just gonna abandon me. And I'm like, you're pushing him away. So this was the one that I disliked the most. All right, let's talk about You and Me. I had so much fun reading this book. This is an romance between 2 single dads, okay? And Luke, his wife Riley, has passed away within the past year, and his son Emmett, they don't have a good relationship anymore. And Luke is describing how when Emmett was very young, they used to bond over all kinds of things, watch cartoons together. He used to laugh at his stupid little accents that he would do, and they would draw together because Luke is very artistic, and he had to kind of give up that dream when Riley became pregnant when they were both in college. Riley was extremely smart. She was almost a career collegiate. Like, she loved being in school. She was working towards her PhD. And during the marriage, they started to kind of resent each other because they grew very much apart, and the only thing keeping them together was Emmett. Well, when Emmett starts getting older, he expressed an interest in football. Luke has no idea about anything about football. He's never been interested in that. They live in Texas. Riley loves football. So she starts hanging out with Emmett more and more and more, and Luke hangs out with Emmett less and less because he's just like, well, I don't know anything about football, and I guess that's Emmett and Riley's thing. He doesn't want me around. He starts like pushing me away, you know, being like, Dad, stop, and stuff like that. So then when Riley suddenly dies, he's like, I don't even know my son anymore, and he hates me. I don't know what to do. He kind of falls into being a part of the booster club because his ex-wife had something in the mail from the booster club to her. And he was going to let them know that, hey, she died, so she can't be a part of this thing. Well, Landon is a part of the booster club, and Landon's like, oh, my son Bowen, he's good friends with Emmett. Emmett was at my house a lot during the summer. You can be involved in the booster club if you want. And Luke decides hey, it'll get me in the vicinity of my son. I might as well give it a shot. Maybe I have a chance at getting to know him a little bit more, being involved in his life, and possibly preparing our relationship. And then Landon has such a good relationship with his son that he just kind of like, I want that. I want that with my son. So they become friends, Landon and Luke. Landon is openly gay. He used to be married, and then he figured out that he was actually gay and divorced his wife, and he's openly out. Everyone's very accepting of Landon. Now Luke thinks he's straight, and so this is a romance between Luke and Landon, because Luke starts developing feelings for Landon. It was so beautiful. I loved it. I love the relationship between Luke and Landon, but also the relationship between Luke and Emmett was fantastic. The growth, the character development was so freaking good. And even between Landon and Bowen as well, who they had a great relationship, but there's just stuff that comes to light toward the end where it was just like, so good. It was so heartwarming. I loved it. Gave this book 4.5 stars. I had a minor little nitpicky thing, but it's kind of like, I don't know if it would be considered a spoiler, but I'll just throw up a spoiler right here. Luke has a literal epiphany about being attracted to Landon. They've kind of been going out on dates, and Luke's been sort of oblivious about it. We're sitting on the same side of a booth in a candlelit dinner and like leaning in toward each other, but he's like not thinking about Landon at all. Like, oh, I'm attracted to this man. He has had no thoughts of that at all. He's just like, I like talking to him. And then one night when he's staying over at Landon's house in the guest bedroom, he wakes up and just is like, I'm in love with him, and starts like jacking off to the thought of Landon. And I was just like, it's almost like very in character with who Luke is as a person, but I also felt like I wish that there was more of a build-up with Luke being like, oh my God, what are these feelings? Am I attracted to this guy? Maybe not. Maybe it's just friendship. And like, I wanted a build-up of that. It was more just kind of like, bam, it smacked him upside the head, and he was just like, I'm in love with Landon. I've never been attracted to a man before, but I'm in love with Landon. And I was like, wish that was executed a little bit better. But anyway, I fucking loved it. Great job. I love this book. I will be reading more by this author. This is a male author as well. Sorry, my battery died. I might have moved around. Then the last new book that I read was The Half-Orc's Maiden Bride by Ruby Dixon. So orc books have kind of become a thing. I'm very into monster romance, and I've loved Ruby Dixon's Ice Planet Barbarian series. I just absolutely love those books. So I was excited that she was writing an orc book because I've only read the first orc book in Finley Fenn's series. I think that's what her name is. And it just wasn't as great as I hoped it would be. So I was excited that Ruby Dixon was writing one, and it was such an enjoyable read. Ruby Dixon tends to write more low angst books, and I appreciate that. Sometimes I'm just looking for a pick-me-up, and I know what I'm getting myself into when it comes to Ruby Dixon. So when I picked up this book, and we had a heroine who is underappreciated by her father because all of her sisters are so dainty. They're so petite and small and beautiful. And our poor heroine, Iolanthe, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but she is over 6 feet tall. She's taller than her dad. She's a plus-size heroine, and she's a spinster. All her sisters have been married off, and she just knows that she's never going to get married. No man would look twice at her, according to her father. Well, one day he's like, I found you a husband. She's like, oh, this is my dream. I've always wanted to be a wife. I've always wanted to be a mother. Like, my sisters have this. My sisters who didn't even care about being married, like, they have what I want, and I just want it so badly. And they travel, and they keep going south and south and south, and she's just like, we're going really far. Like, what lord is down here? And then all of a sudden she finds out that her dad is betrothing her to a half-orc man. In return, he's getting a pile of money and an alliance. So she's floored. Her dad does not care about her feelings, but she asked to speak with our hero, Agakar. I don't know if I'm saying his name either correctly, but asked to speak to him in private, and she's concerned that he is not going to be happy with her. Like, of course she's afraid. She just knows that orcs are kind of like barbarians and stuff like that. She's like, I don't know what my father told you about me. I'm sorry if I'm not what you expected. I know I'm so tall and not pretty and all that jazz. And he's just like, I don't want a, slip of a wife. I'd crush her. Like, you are perfect. You're beautiful. You're voluptuous. And that's exactly what I want. So this whole book is Iolanthe kind of finding her place in a very unexpected way, because she never thought herself as being married to a half-orc guy. and he's the person that treats her with so much love and respect and devotion. He worships her body, he worships her, and it's just a beautiful relationship, and I fucking loved it. I gave that book 4 stars. Now, I've also been rereading Julia Quinn's Bridgerton series because it's been a long time since I've reread all of them. I tend to reread my favorites, and the book that I reread the most is The Viscount Who Loved Me. Well, after season 2, knowing that it was nothing like the book, I just wanted to jump back into it. So I started off with An Offer from a Gentleman in March, and also Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. So the next one I needed to pick up was To Sir Philip with Love. This is Eloise and Sir Philip's book. And I don't foresee that show Eloise and show Philip are gonna get together. It just doesn't seem like it's gonna be feasible with the type of character that they have portrayed Eloise to be. I saw somebody mention that they took Hyacinth's personality from the books and superimposed that a little bit on Eloise, and I have to say it's true. After rereading Eloise's book, Eloise is nothing like show Eloise. She's a lot quieter. She's definitely not against marriage. She just doesn't want to settle for anybody who she doesn't love because she's seen her older siblings find love matches and she's like, that's what I want. And nobody's proposed to me that I felt that way about. So I'm just going to be a spinster with Penelope. Then once Penelope gets engaged, now she kind of feels a little bit alone. Eloise is a writer. She loves writing letters to anybody, to everybody, to far distant cousins and stuff like that. And in the book, she is cousins with Marina, which they changed for the show. So when Marina dies, she writes to Marina's husband, Sir Philip, to express her condolences. And they kind of start this back and forth through letters over the course of a year. And then when Penelope gets engaged and then Sir Philip kind of suggests like, hey, I think we would be suited. What do you think about marriage between us? Eloise just decides to kind of run away from London to go visit Sir Philip and see if they would suit. And hopefully her family doesn't pursue her and she can get a chaperone over there and kind of test out the waters and see if she and Sir Philip would suit as well as they suit through letters. The problem is Sir Philip agonizes over every single word that he writes in a letter. He's not very good. He's not a people person. He's not very good at just conversing. He loves to hang out in his greenhouse. He has trouble forming relationships. So when Eloise gets there, she's just like, this is not the type of man that he was in the letters. I thought we'd have easy conversation and stuff. He also has 2 hellion children, and I love Amanda and Oliver. I love it. I love it so much. And mainly he's looking for a wife because he needs a mother figure for his children. But then he is attracted to Eloise. And it's an opposites attract romance that I totally fell in love with. I love this book. I love this book. So it's still, a 4.5 star for me. Then I read When He Was Wicked, Francesca, who is getting absolutely sidelined in the show. Like, do we even know what Francesca looks like? Can you describe her from the show? No. But you know what? It's kind of similar in the books, I will say. She's not very prominent. That's partly due to Francesca actually being married when she's young. She gets married way before Eloise to a man named John Sterling, and this book starts off with her and John in a happy marriage. They've been married for about 2 years now, and his estate's in Scotland, but they are both, Francesca and John, best friends with his older cousin, Michael. Now, Michael and John's fathers were twins, and the only reason why John is inheriting is because his father was the older twin, even though Michael is older than John. Problem is, Michael has always had a thing for Francesca, and he fell in love with her before he knew that Francesca and John were engaged. Or I think they got engaged the night that Michael met Francesca. And then all of a sudden his cousin's marrying her. And he's like, oh shit, I'm in love with my cousin's fiance. So he's been secretly pining for Francesca, knowing that he could never have her for 2 years. And since this is a romance, it's not a spoiler because John dies very early on in the book, in the first couple of chapters. And Francesca and Michael's relationship doesn't pick up until years later. I think 6 years pass before their relationship picks up. And this is the angstiest book in the Bridgerton series because Francesca agonizes over moving on from John, even though she actually does want to. She wants to get remarried because she really wants a baby. But she doesn't expect herself to fall in love with anybody else, let alone fall in love with his cousin. It's like a double betrayal. So they're both struggling with their feelings, and it's beautiful and wonderful and so lovely, and I really love this book. So 4.5 stars for When He Was Wicked. Loved it. Okay, that's all the books that I read for the first half of April. and we'll see what I pick up next. I think I might try to stick to like historicals, paranormals, and sci-fis just because the Mafia Romance readathon's coming up at the beginning of May, and I don't want to get burnt out on contemporaries or Mafia in general. I just don't want to get burnt out before that readathon because I want to feel fresh, and I like to switch genres of romance so that I feel like, oh, I've been reading a lot of historicals lately and now I'm ready for something different. Let's switch to contemporary. So that's my strategy here. If you like this video, give it a big thumbs up, and if you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys.